What's good, folks? This is Root. So I'm going to review T.I.'s album from 2007, T.I. vs. T.I.P. Basically, this was a song on T.I.'s trap music album from 2003, and this is like the amalgamation of how that prospect kind of surfaced. It was kind of something T.I. had noted before, and basically what this project denotes is the fact that T.I. kind of has split personalities, where T.I. is the more suave and kind of more maybe not blue collar, but more composed and put together type musician. And TIP is the part of TI that's still kind of in the trap and wants to make more hustling and street type anthems like he did back in I'm Serious trap music. Songs like maybe like 24s and Be Easy and some of those type records, just stuff like that from Ti's earlier days. And so it was kind of the concept just because Ti hit big with his album King and kind of had the concept about that just because with songs like What You Know, Why You Wanna, and Top Back, he kind of started to really get some mainstream headway and he kind of started to take the actual crown for being king of the South and that he started to take the crown for being king of the South and that type of stuff. So it was interesting to kind of get that. He broke into the mainstream and he was up there competing with people like Jeezy and Lil Wayne, Birdman, and those type folks as far as like the throne, as far as like the central type fellow for the headway of like southern rap music. And with Eminem kind of having a departure and 50 Cent kind of dwindling in popularity, it seemed like T.I. was about one of the faces of mainstream music around the late 2000s, between like 2006 and 2009. So it was interesting. This is kind of a bewildered album. It's kind of taken aback. It does not have the severe bite of King, but then I really like this album. I feel like this is probably one of T.I.'s best albums. I just would have to say maybe it doesn't have the sheer quality number one damn near single of What You Know, or just the overall cresting chart suaveness of Why You Wanna, or the overall kind of street single, but still kind of a pretty glossy chart single of Top Back, but it does kind of have like some good hits on here. I just kind of felt like this is kind of an album where if you want club cuts from T.I., where I kind of complained about trap music not really having enough of those, where it did have some good singles, but it didn't quite have enough like standard like nightclub, vanilla club type songs and just overall nightlife type oriented stuff. It had a lot of good trap and street singles, but it just didn't have a lot for like stepping out in a nightlife. Well, this album has that, but this time it doesn't have the sheer kind of abrupt quality of some of the singles from it doesn't have some of the sheer abrupt quality of some of the singles from trap music and King. I mean, I feel like this album is good. I definitely feel like this is an excellent album, but compared to King, I think it's just a little bit more of a lazy kind of veneer this time. And not in terms of the lyricism, but just in terms of like the execution of how it happened. I kind of feel like Big Shit Poppin', You Know What It Is, and Hurt are kind of some of the kind of more secondary kind of TI songs that are just not front page headliners like What You Know and Rubber Band Man and like Live Your Life and Whatever You Like and some of those type songs that have more headway for T.I. and that type stuff in 24s. So I just would have to say it's interesting to kind of get that, but it's not like these songs are bad. I just kind of feel like this is kind of an under talked about kind of T.I. album. And in a lot of ways, I've heard in the past that folks have said that this album really is kind of meh or just kind of mediocre, but it's not. I feel like this is definitely one of his best. It can compete with King and Paper Trail. It is kind of unfortunate that it's not talked about more because it really has some pretty thorough qualities about it worth kind of noting. And, you know, on top of that, has some good guests on here. Like Nelly's on here, Eminem is on here, Jay-Z's on here, Busta Rhymes is on here. He has a good pairing a couple times with Wyclef Jean from the Fugees. So there is some good stuff on here, just interesting kind of concepts for how some of this works. And it does kind of have like a mild summer feel, not the whole way through, but it does have like a taste of summer just because this album did come out in the summer of 2007. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about the singles from this album. The first single was Big Shit Poppin', and this is kind of like a sprawling kind of club song, not quite as furious and in your face as What You Know, not quite as ravenous and has as much bite, but definitely just kind of a confident and kind of sprawling, looming kind of club type song that just really feels like the confidence that this song kind of has. It just is kind of more of like, you know what this is type attitude, where this is kind of like a victory lap and that type of stuff. And I would just definitely have to say it works as like a good cut as far as just having another central night in the club and that type of stuff. Definitely a night venue type song. Really works as far as that kind of goes. Big Shit Poppin' just has a lot of kind of spare and kind of forgotten about dominant T.I. that I think is just another hit for him. And this did chart in like the top 10 of the Billboard 100. So it's a pretty good song, but it's just kind of, I don't want to say ho hum, but the reception of it was kind of ho hum. It's just not everyday kind of work a day talked about in usual context, but it is a great song. And You Know What It Is, I really like this song. This is the second single. You Know What It Is has Wyclef Jean on there, and it was kind of an odd pairing just because most people had not messed with Wyclef Jean for quite a while. Most people had not messed with Wyclef Jean for quite a while, but this is really an excellent club song. Like there's definitely some kind of vanilla kind of strip club and nightlife and nightclub type songs on this album, but this is one where the energy is just really at some summer heat. This kind of feels like a bubbler the whole way through, or the kind of room is just hot and hazy and just that type of stuff, where it doesn't have to be in, colder places like Chicago and New York and Detroit, but it can kind of be in places like, Atlanta and Miami and some of those places where you're near water and it's just a little bit warmer, maybe even in the Caribbean and that type of stuff. Some of those places really works as like a real, it has an addictive chorus, definitely a real addictive chorus. T.I.'s swagger drawl is really infectious on this song, and Wyclef helps, and it just really kind of comes off as like a real energetic. This one has more energy than Big Shit Poppin', but I would have to say that it just really works as like this is a true example of like a swag rap song, and it just has like that great energy, just an eclectic and or just kind of an electric club song that just works extremely well. It's too bad. I mean, this song charted decently, but this kind of wrapped up the most of the this song kind of wrapped up most of the commercial promotion for this project, because right as T.I. was getting ready to drop the third single, "Hurt," he got arrested, which resulted in like the rollout for Paper Trail the next year. But it's just kind of the concept that this was a real kind of groovy kind of song. So the third single is "Hurt," and this is really kind of up tempo. This has the most energy of all the singles. This is T.I. back on his king and trap music type days, and a little bit of urban legend in there. And I would have to say that T.I. only drops one verse on this song. It's a posse song, but Busta Rhymes and Alpha Mega, who I think is from PSC, they all do a great job on there. But T.I. really has a real energetic verse, and it just kind of comes off to me as kind of more of like a sports game, like a football, basketball game, that type of stuff, someplace where you'd be around sports. And it kind of can also be kind of like a more nightclub, or maybe not so much nightclub, but just kind of night venue type setting, someplace where you're going to be at like a booth and have like a drink or something, just kind of let the music kind of sink in while you're flirting and that type of stuff. Not quite as sprawling and as cool sounding as You Know What It Is, but it just kind of has that venue of just being out and about and just kind of appreciating more of the surroundings more so than the music, where You Know What It Is just kind of more of a groovy kind of two-step kind of song, and Big Shit Poppin's kind of more of the pull up to the club kind of stunt and floss type stuff. So this is kind of the concept, but Hurt is just kind of more relaxed and just kind of focusing, but it does have energy and kind of can get you hyped depending upon how much you listen to it. So this would have to say these are all good ones. It's too bad that T.I. got arrested around this time, but if he hadn't, we might not have gotten we might not have gotten Paper Trail, which really had some great songs on there, and really that was the album that really got him into further mainstream before he got arrested. So I'm gonna go ahead and talk about the 10 songs out of 15 I recommend. So there's actually 18 songs, but 3 of them are just kind of skits, which kind of send off the segments of the album, which is the T.I.P section, the T.I. section, and the T.I. versus T.I.P section. So I'll kind of get into that as we go along with it, but minus those 3 interludes, here are the 10 songs I recommend. They would be big shit poppin', you know what it is, hurt, touchdown, raw, we do this, don't you want to be high, help is coming, my swag, and the dope man. So the T.I.P section has a lot of good boilers on there. This has a lot, but then so does the T.I. section, where the more trap and street type singles work for T.I. just because he proves that he can still do it, even if these are not quite as addictive. I mean, I feel like all the singles come from the T.I.P section, but like I said, these are just kind of taken aback and not quite as ferocious as the singles off of Urban Legend and trap music. There's no ASAP. There's no you don't know me. There's no motivation. There's no 24s. There's no Rubber Band Man or Be Easy and that type of stuff. But these are pretty good. I mean, they're just more comfortable Ti, a little bit more eloquent, and just kind of has like a more emphasis to where even if he is kind of ravenous and kind of has that has like a more aggressive personality, it's just not. It's kind of in the context of just kind of having a more like composed bite, but it still is rough Ti. So I like the fact that he at least did it. But to talk about some of these besides the singles, I feel like the Dope Man is a great street single, has a great beat on there. It just really feels like a mixtape cut. Raw is kind of a great club song. This is kind of one of those Raw is like a real great vanilla club song, vanilla nightclub type song, and definitely I feel like that one's just has a pretty basic kind of approach, not quite as sprawling as Big Shit Poppin' or quite as emphatic as you know what it is, but just kind of gets you through the night. Not quite as noteworthy, but I do feel like it has just like a pretty standard like raw, just like the song says, a very raw and kind of just straightforward and blunt kind of approach towards a club type music. And it's the same thing with Help Is Coming. That one's very similar. That's another mixtape cut that kind of works pretty well. Help Is Coming is like a Just Blaze beat that sounds ripped out of 2006, but it's actually from 2007. This is a great kind of mixtape cut, and this feels like another night venue that just where the music's just blaring and you're just going through a pretty ravenous night out at the club and that type of stuff. The energy's pretty good. I feel like the energy on Help Is Coming. This has like I mean, this one's kind of like hurt, a little bit more motivated, not quite as comfortable as you know what it is or big shit popping, but it just has a good energy on there. It's good that Ti doesn't get into ever one particular type of temperament where he has kind of more up tempo songs, he has more comfortable songs. Just his energy and how he captured his energy and how he captures it is really good on this project. So he has different moods for that sort of stuff. So you can't just say, oh well he's too calm or he's too uptight and all that stuff. He does it in various degrees. So Help Is Coming is a nice energetic one. My Swag is a nice kind of gimmick song where he raps in a particular type gimmick way. He raps in a particular gimmick type way, but has a real addictive kind of summary type beat. So Wyclef's genre really gives Ti some summary type songs with You Know What It Is, My Swag, and then there's another summer song with Don't You Want to Be High. But My Swag really feels like a vacation resort type song, somewhere kind of in a more Florida and Hawaii type place. Just those kind of like pink skies type stuff. This real kind of emphatic vacation type stuff. And Don't You Want to Be High is pretty much one of the few songs for the ladies on this album. I was kind of expecting maybe another song like Let's Get Away or Why You Wanna from like King or trap music, that type of stuff. I think T.I. probably could have thrown another few songs like that on here. So Don't You Want to Be High is like a real kind of mellow, just lambent kind of relaxation relationship type song that works pretty well. It's a nice track for the ladies. Touchdown with Eminem is a great kind of like the song says, just touching down. It's kind of if you travel a lot, just kind of touching base on some of your old stomping grounds and that type of stuff, rekindling relationships with old friends, that type of stuff, reflecting on old times. Just kind of a real mellow, but this can kind of be played in a nightclub. Eminem did a great job. Eminem and the Bass Brothers did a nice job on this beat right here. It just really sounds triumphant in kind of a mellow way. Can kind of be played at like a strip club in some sense, which Eminem doesn't. Eminem doesn't typically do strip club songs, but it's kind of like a mellow strip club type song, and just kind of like a nice kind of mellow nightclub song. I mean, I just have to emphasize the word mellow because it's not very energetic. It's just kind of a lazy, kind of just like touched down where, hey, I'm not quite as excited this time, but just kind of relaxed and just kind of comfortable more. And it's just interesting because this is Eminem from 2007, is kind of where he was at that point in time. He was definitely way more comfortable than T.I. was by this point. So it's just interesting to kind of get how both of them just kind of have like lazy verses, but the song is still good. So it's pretty good to get a song with both of them being that comfortable and have it be quality. So I do like that song. And kind of talk about some of these other ones. Like We Do This is another vanilla nightclub type song. This is just T.I. showing that he can do nightclub songs for days, kind of like Future and Rocco and some of those type folks. I mean, these are just, great substandard night. I mean, really, it's just interesting just to suppose that T.I. can kind of get some of these vibes just because he didn't really showcase that on trap music. He didn't really showcase that on trap music, so it's interesting to kind of see some of these this kind of because he had a lot of song palette on King, and I definitely kind of feel like that one was kind of packed to the gills with a whole bunch of ideas on there. But it's just good that kind of these are just lazy kind of nightclub and vanilla nightclub type songs, and just kind of stepping out and some summer songs thrown in on top of that. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and score this album. I'm gonna give this album an 8.25 out of 10. Me liking 10 songs out of 15. I feel like that's pretty well put together. It definitely is better to me than trap music, and it's probably up there with King and probably Paper Trail. Those are some of T.I.'s best. Talk about some of the stuff I didn't enjoy. I feel like some of these songs, like I didn't really like the third act of this album, the T.I. versus T.I.P confrontation. Like I felt like My Type and Tell 'Em I Said That were just kind of more kind of like songs that were just kind of more talking at you and that type stuff. Where Tell 'Em I Said That was just kind of a song talking about all these rappers who are trying to get in the game that aren't really as street as they need to be. So I suppose that's okay, but it just kind of felt kind of preachy. And then My Type was kind of a pseudo retirement song back in 2007 that T.I. flirted with the idea of kind of saying that there's not going to be more folks like me and that type of stuff. The type of stuff that Eminem would do at the end of his albums, where he would kind of have like the finale type song, and people would always think he'd retire. And Respect This Hustle, I really like the beat on Respect This Hustle. This was almost kind of a really like emphatic club song if it just would have been a normal song and they hadn't had like the bickering between his two split personalities. But it just was kind of, I don't know, I feel like it was pulled off okay, but it was just kind of a little bit messier than what it probably should have been. Yeah, Respect This Hustle was just a little bit messier than I would have liked it to have been. Watch What You Say to Me was kind of a decent club type beat. I can kind of see that, but it was pretty abrasive. It definitely felt like something was getting ready to get started, like fights were getting ready to get started, kind of a little bit more aggressive than I remember T.I. being later. I mean, he really calmed down a lot after this album after he got arrested, but this is kind of one of the more where he was ready to fight and that type stuff, or he was ready to fight and that type stuff. It was just kind of, I don't know, it's just not the energy that I would match terribly often. And I like the concept of Show It to Me with Nelly. I kind of think that had like a nice kind of emphatic kind of fancy date night at like a restaurant or something where there's going to be bands and trumpets and that type of stuff. But I don't know, I didn't somehow the approach just didn't quite match how often I would want to step out in that kind of sense. So I appreciated the concept of Show It to Me, but I just wasn't vibing with that one. And yeah, I just would have to say and stuff. So that's a good emphasis about it. There wasn't really that many songs I didn't enjoy. It was really just the Act 3 songs, and then like Show It to Me and Watch What You Say to Me. So that's kind of the concept about it. Just for the most part, it's not to terribly complain about some of the stuff. I mean, for the most part, these are just kind of more individual complaints about some of these songs. Minus like the third act, which was just kind of talking at you more and just kind of had like not quite as much of a better handling for like the bickering that I would have liked. But I do kind of feel like for the most part, this album really delivers on most of the context of it. There's really only like two songs out of the first two acts that I didn't really enjoy. So that's pretty good to kind of say that. But just kind of looking after it, I just would have to say that the most of this album, like 2/3 of this album, and then plus the fact that of the first two acts, I basically liked everything. So that's kind of the concept. So the social score is going to get like a 9 or the social score will get an 8.5 out of 10, just because there's a lot of club cuts on here, a lot of vanilla club songs, a lot of good nightlife songs and stepping out, and summer songs, relationship songs. Just overall great summery vibes and stepping out type atmospheres about it. This is definitely more kind of a floss and kind of flex album than T.I. normally does, despite the fact that the energy is so relaxed. So it's kind of a dichotomy, just because T.I. kind of flexes on this album, but then at the same time it's just so nonchalant and kind of comfortable. And it's just interesting to kind of get that, because a lot of people feel like this is kind of a mediocre and kind of not necessarily noteworthy T.I. project, but that's on the contrary. And I think that that's just kind of the concept. It just has some real good energy, minus like a few snags here and there, but a tad few snags here and there. But that's just kind of the concept. So, can this record be top? For the most part, not really. King, T.I. versus T.I.P, and Paper Trail, all three excellent projects by T.I. And then I just would have to say, in terms of the future, like T.I. has said for the past while that his last album is going to be called Kill the King. T.I. has said that his last album is going to be called Kill the King, which I would like to get more T.I. albums, just because he does have a lot of gems of these, but it's just too bad because now he's actually done with the King of the South title and veneer and that type of stuff. So he's moving on from being the King of the South, because he said it puts a target on his back. But hopefully we'll get some more projects from T.I., because this one's really good, and there's just a bunch more I'm going to review and such.